Hi. Cool. So sorry about the late start today, a little bit of technical difficulties, but again, my name is Jeffrey. I'm going to be going over some commonly asked micro and macroeconomics questions, and I've just assembled a list. We're going to go over them together. I haven't looked at all the answers, so I'll be doing it just at the same time as you guys, and then after we find the right answer to all these questions, we can also take a look at some answers that previous tutors have given to see how accurate those are. So with that being said, let's jump straight into the first question. And so the first question is, which is a fundamental element of supply-side economics? 1, corporate tax hikes. 2, economic deregulation. 3, marginal tax hikes. 4, tax hikes. Or 5, stringent economic regulations. And so this is really just a definition-based question. Supply-side economics is an economic theory which has two main elements. The first is tax cuts, and the second is economic deregulation. And so among those two choices, we know that economic deregulation is the only one that's present. Everybody else is talking about raising taxes instead of cutting taxes. And so economic deregulation would be the best answer choice here. And again, this is just something that you'd have to be familiar with in order to get right. Kind of one of those textbook definitions. And so supply-side economics is just one of the theories of how an economy should be regulated, as opposed to demand-side economics, which talks about what you can do on the consumption side to stimulate the economy. Let's take a look at the previous tutors' answers, see if they also got what we got. And so they say 5 as well, economic deregulation. Supply-side economics is the economic theory that argues against economic regulations. It believes that economic deregulation and decreases in taxes can lead to economic growth most effectively. It is the opposite of demand-side economics that considers high demand for goods and services as the fundamental propellant of demand and supply. Supply-side economics believes that a greater supply of goods will increase the benefits consumers receive along with an increase in employment. It advocates excessive economic deregulations as it believes high taxation can be a discouraging agent for investments in economic activity. Yeah, so that's really good. It goes into the theory, talks about both taxes and economic deregulation, and kind of breaks down why supply-side economic is different from demand-side economics. So I think all in all, that's a great answer, and we can just mark that as correct. All right, moving on. So the next question says, cyclical unemployment is closely associated with which one of the following? Number 1, long-term economic growth. Number 2, short-run ups and downs of the economy. Number 3, fluctuations in the natural rate of unemployment. And number 4, seasonal fluctuations in spending. And so, just as a quick refresher, we have to identify what is cyclical unemployment. And so we know there are 3 types of main unemployment. There's frictional unemployment, structural unemployment, and cyclical unemployment. And cyclical unemployment is unemployment that is a result of fluctuations in the business cycle. If you recall from some of your lecture notes, you might have remembered that a business cycle has 4 stages: trough, expansion, peak, and recession. And so basically, if the economy is doing well, you're going to have low unemployment. If the economy is not doing so well, you're going to have high unemployment, right? And so that business cycle runs on average like 5.5 years, and it's just a fluctuation around a overall growth in the economy. Because in the long term, we expect the economy to grow, but in the short term, there will be fluctuations in how fast exactly the economy is growing, right? Or growing. So the first answer choice, long-term economic growth. We know that, again, cyclical unemployment is not going to be a result of the long-term growth. Rather, it's going to be a result of the variations from the long-term rate of growth, right? So in the short term, you might have higher than expected growth in the expansionary gap or inflationary gap, and then we might have slower than normal growth with a recessionary gap, right? So it's not going to be 1. 2 says short-run ups and downs in the economy. And so this seems to be the best description for what the business cycle is. It is just a short run ups and downs of the economy. And so that seems to be the closest to what the right answer might be, but we can take a look at 3 and 4 as well. 3 says fluctuations in the natural rate of unemployment. And so we know that unemployment can fluctuate, but that's largely a result of the fluctuations in cyclical unemployment. Natural rate of unemployment is the total of frictional unemployment and structural unemployment, and those figures tend to remain relatively more steady compared to cyclical unemployment. And so there aren't going to be many fluctuations from those two types of employment that affect cyclical unemployment. So it's not going to be three. Number four says seasonal fluctuations in spending. And so spending isn't really directly related to unemployment. And so it's also not the case that there are fluctuations in large fluctuations in spending depending on what season it is. And so it's not going to be four as well. So two is going to be our best answer here. Short run up and downs of the economy. You can take a look at the previous tutor's answer. The previous tutor says short run ups and downs of the economy. Cyclical unemployment is a consequence of the short run fluctuations in the business cycle. A business cycle is not linear but cyclic as the economy moves from its expansionary phase to a recessionary one after reaching its peak of economic activity, and from a recessionary phase to a path of expansion after reaching the lowest level of profitability and prosperity. When the economy is going through a downturn, there's a reduction in the level of aggregate demand. This subsequently causes a reduction in the profitability of the market for firms, compelling them to lay off their variable factors to remain operational by saving costs. As laborers are laid off due to low economic activity, unemployment is generated that is known as cyclical unemployment. It is not natural to the economy and hence represents a deviation of the unemployment from its natural rate. So yeah, that's a really great answer. Kind of puts into context all three types of unemployment and also better explains the link between the business cycle and the cyclical unemployment that we see. So I think this is a really thorough answer. And the solution is correct. Okay, let's take a look at the next question. So the next question says, an increase in the excise tax on cigarettes raises the price of cigarettes by shifting the A, supply curve for cigarettes rightward, B, supply curve for cigarettes leftward, C, both demand and supply for cigarettes rightward, D, both demand and supply curves for cigarettes leftward. So again, let's take a look at what an excise tax is going to look like. So assuming that the tax is going to be on the seller side, we know it's going to affect the supply curve. It's not going to, I don't think any tax affects both supply and demand, right? And so, sorry, let me get to the draw. Yeah, here we are. So we have our supply curve and demand curve. And an increase in the excise tax is going to be a tax levied on sellers that raises the prices of cigarettes at every single price level of the quantity supplied. Or, said in other words, it's going to reduce the quantity supplied at every price level, right? And so what that looks like is going to be a leftward shift. Whoa, that's not good. Let me draw it one more time. It's going to be a leftward shift in the supply curve, and the excise tax is going to be the difference in price for the equal quantity supplied for each type of good, right? And so that increase in excise tax is going to be resulting in answer choice B, supply curve for cigarettes shifting leftward. And to add on to that, we would say by the amount that the price, the excise tax is that is levied on the cigarettes. And so let's take a look at the previous tutor's answers. So previous tutor says B, supply curve for cigarettes is shifted leftward. An increase in the excise tax on a pack tax on cigarettes will shift the supply of cigarettes inwards into a left, increasing the equilibrium price of cigarettes, but lowering the equilibrium quantity. Due to a large excise tax on a pack of cigarettes, the supply of cigarettes decreases and the supply curve shifts to the left. And when supply decreases, it creates an excess demand at the old equilibrium price. This leads to competition among buyers, which raises the price. An increase in price leads to a rise in supply and a fall in demand, thus leading to an increase in the equilibrium price of quantity, but lowering of the equilibrium quantity. So again, I think this breaks down kind of the step-by-step shift, but in terms of how do you get from the old equilibrium to a new equilibrium, but I assume you guys probably already know that. I think the focus should be more so on how much is the distance between the previous supply curve and the new supply curve. So the difference between the pre-tax supply curve and the post-tax supply curve is equal to the excise tax amount. And so that's going to be important to note, but otherwise, yeah, good answer. Yeah, and the solution is correct. Okay. The next question says, evidence shows that the quantity equation is correct over the long run, which implies that A, the growth rate of the velocity of money causes the level of prices to change. B, growth rate of GDP causes most of the change in the money supply. C, growth rate of the money supply determines the rate of the inflation. Or D, growth rate of inflation leads to growth in GDP. And so this is going to be a question that's testing our knowledge of the quantity theory of money, which broken down into equation form is fairly simple. It's simply MV equals PY, where M is equal to the money supply, which is how much money is in the economy. V is equal to the velocity of money, which is what we assume is constant. It is a average number of times that money exchanges hands in circulation in a given year. Like a single dollar bill, for example, how many times does it change hands in a given year? P is equal to the price level in the average price level of the economy, and Y is equal to total output of the economy. And so this quantity theory of money equation, if we assume it to be true in the long run, would hold two things constant and two things variable. First, we would hold velocity of money constant. We assume that over the long run, there's a single steady velocity of money. And second would be output, because in the long run, we would be at potential GDP. So output would be achieving its full potential. So you wouldn't be able to change that. And that leaves our two variables as M, which is the money supply, and P, which is the price level. So let's take a look at these answer choices and see which one of those fits our quantity theory of money equation. A says the growth rate and the velocity of money causes the level of prices to change. And so because we hold the velocity of money constant, the growth rate of the velocity of money is 0, but P is variable, and so those wouldn't be able to be equivalent to each other. B says growth rate of the GDP causes most of the change in the money supply. And so again, because we're holding GDP constant, Y is equal to output or GDP. It has a growth rate of 0, and therefore it cannot equal the growth rate of the change in the money supply, which would be variable. It could be positive or negative. C says the growth rate of the money supply determines the rate of inflation, and this is true, right? Because we have the growth rate of the money supply would be variable, and that means if we hold V and Y constant, whatever rate that we change M at, we would have to change P at the same rate. And inflation is changes in price, right? And so increasing price would be increasing inflation. And so C seems to be the best answer right now. And finally, D says growth rate of inflation leads to a growth in GDP. But first, inflation would be variable while GDP is constant. And second, P and Y both appear on the same side of the quantity equation, not on different sides. And so those would be equivalent rates of growth. And so C is going to be our best answer here. Growth rate of the money supply determines the rate of inflation. Okay, let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer. The previous tutor said the quantity theory of money is mainly used to describe the relationship between the money supply and the price level. It states that the money supply and the price level are both directly proportional to each other, which means if the money supply increases, the price level also increases in the same proportion. The quantity theory of money in equation form can be written as MV equals PT. Here, M is the money supply, P is the price level, V is the velocity of money, and volume of the transaction. It also states that in the long run, the growth rate of the money supply is equal to the growth rate of the price, which is inflation. Therefore, option C is the correct answer. So I'm just going to amend that. T is also sometimes written as Y and represents the total output of the economy, i.e. GDP. Okay. Otherwise, that would be, the rest of the answer is correct, and so we'll mark that as correct, and we can move on. Okay. So the next question says, which of the following is not a reason why specialization and trade are beneficial to society? And so the first answer choice says, number one, specialization fosters learning by doing, thus lowering the unit costs of production. Number two, firms and workers become less dependent on others for producing goods and services. Number three, the total output of economic goods may be increased even without any increase in resources. Number four, scarce resources are utilized more efficiently by exploiting differences among them. And so we're looking for which one of these reasons is not a benefit of specialization and trade. Number one, specialization fosters learning by doing and lowering unit costs of products. Because specialization means workers are focusing on just one type of production, those workers will obviously get better at doing that kind of production, and that does lower the cost of production. And so that would be something that is correct, and so it's not going to be the right answer choice here. Number two says firms and workers become less dependent on others for producing goods and services. And this is not going to be true, right? We know that specialization in trade means that because you only focus production on one unit of good, you are dependent on other firms and workers in different countries to produce the other types of goods that you need so that you can trade for them and get access to those goods. And so this does increase the level of dependence on other people. And so this is going to be a favorite for the correct answer to this question. We can look at number 3 and 4. The number 3 says the total output of economic goods may be increased even without any increase in resources. And again, this is true because you're specializing into areas in which you have a comparative advantage. You are able to more efficiently produce that type of unit versus your opposing trade partner being able to better produce the other type of unit that you want. And so together you are increasing the efficiency of use of your resources even without actually increasing the number of resources that you have overall. So that's going to be a benefit of trade for sure. And finally, scarce resources are utilized more efficiently by exploiting differences among them. And again, because you're specializing and allowing those trades to happen, you're going to have the differences between resources being more advantageous to specific types of production. For example, if you're producing cars, you're going to use more of the steel rather than the types of products like grain that require other types of resources like land or water, right? And so that is one other benefit of trade to society. So again, our final answer is going to be B. Firms and workers become less dependent on others for producing goods and services. Let's take a look at the previous tutor's answers. The previous tutor says firms and workers become less dependent on others for producing goods and services. So great, we're all on the same page. All right, let's move on to number 27. Laissez-Faire capitalism limits the government's economic function to a following except, number 1, protecting private property rights, number 2, establishing a legal environment to enforce contracts among individuals, number 3, setting prices of individual goods and services, and number 4, preventing individuals and firms from coercing each other. So the first thing to understand here is what is laissez-faire capitalism. So laissez-faire, I think, literally translates into let it be, and essentially is a theory of economics that government's only role is to establish the rules for the economic quote-unquote game and then allowing everybody to play fairly. But it shouldn't regulate specific parts of the market like prices or output levels or quantity produced or anything like that. It just provides the basis for proper economic or capitalist function, right? And so two of those bases are protecting private property rights and also establishing a fair legal environment for contract enforcement. Those are both elements that are required of the government to operate in an effective laissez-faire theory system, right? And so it's not going to be A or B. Number C says setting prices of individual goods and services. And this is one of those things where laissez-faire capitalism would say government has no purpose or role in doing anything like that. Government should not be intervening on such a minute level or specific level of the government of the economy, and so this is something that we would not see advocated for by laissez-faire capitalism. So that would be a favorite. But D says preventing individuals or firms from coercing others, and again, basically another. Kind of going back to this idea that government's role with a laissez-faire capitalist viewpoint is to ensure the economy operates fairly, but not intervene in any way. And so preventing individuals and firms from coercion is a way of making sure the economy runs fairly. And so the correct answer here would be laissez-faire capitalism limits the government's economic functions to the following except setting prices of individual goods and services. We can take a look at the previous tutor's answers to see if they match up with ours. So at number 27, they said setting prices of individual goods and services as well, which is good. So great, we can move on to the next question. Number 28. Number 28 says a production system where various workers concentrate on different specialized tasks to contribute towards a whole product is referred to as A, roundabout production, B, a coincidence of wants, C, a freedom of enterprise, or D, division of labor. And again, this is going to be a definition-based question. Which one of these answer choices best matches the definition provided? And so, because we know we're talking about a production system, we're going to be picking between A and D. B and C are just kind of general concepts; they're not types of production. And so, A is roundabout production, which is where you are focusing production on capital goods before focusing and turning around and doing production of consumer goods. And that doesn't seem to be what this what this question is referring to. And D says division of labor, where you're essentially, instead of saying you have a generalist labor force where everybody can do anything, you have specific teams working on specific parts of your production. So the best example of this might be an assembly line where one person is an expert on putting on the wheels, another expert is an expert on putting on window shields and stuff like that. And so that's what we refer to as division of labor. And so division of labor seems to be the best answer choice here to match this definition. A production system where various workers concentrate on different specialized tasks to contribute towards a whole product is referred to as division of labor. Great, so let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer. So the previous tutor said division of labor as well. So we're all set here. Okay, number 29. Number 29 says, the market system is said to be characterized by consumer sovereignty. This is because A, a sovereign government determines which consumer goods will be produced. B, firms must match their production decisions to the consumer's choices. C, the prices of consumer goods are regulated by a sovereign government. D, consumer goods are considered to be more important than capital goods. Okay, so this is basically testing, again, definitions. And so the question is, what does consumer sovereignty mean? So consumer sovereignty refers to this idea that the market system is really self-regulated by consumer sovereignty, in that whatever consumers control what is supplied, because things that consumers want more of are going to express higher demand. You're going to have higher production to match that demand, and consumer sovereignty in terms of not favoring certain goods will mean that those goods will experience less supply. And so the market system is really set up to match the needs and wants of the consumer, and that's what we refer to as consumer sovereignty. So this is clearly not what A says. So A is talking about government intervention, which is where a government is determining which goods are produced. That's not what happens in the market system, and it's also not what we refer to as consumer sovereignty. B says firms must match their production decisions to consumers' choices, and this does seem to be a proper answer choice for us. This idea that suppliers have to pay attention to what consumers want when they're making their production decisions, that does seem to be in line with what we said that consumer sovereignty is. C says the prices of consumer goods are regulated by a sovereign government, and again, price regulation, quantity regulation, that is not what a market system means, and is not what consumer sovereignty means. And D says consumer goods are considered to be more important than capital goods. And so you can think of more so that consumer sovereignty refers to overall the preferences of buyers is more important than the preferences of sellers. And so if whether or not you're buying a consumer good or a capital good, you're still a buyer. And so that is not going to be, that difference between consumer capital goods is not going to be relevant to consumer sovereignty ideas. So B is going to be our best answer here. The market system is said to be characterized by consumer sovereignty because firms must match their production decisions to consumers' choices. And we can take a look at the previous tutor's answer as well, and they said, number 29, firms must match their production decisions to consumers' choices. Great. So let's move on to the next question. Question number 30. Consumers express self-interest when they A. Seek the lowest price for a product, B. Reduce business losses, C. Exclude others in their thinking, or D. Collect economic profits. And so this is going back to one of the basic principles of economics, which is this idea that consumers are selfish or self-interested, and we see that when we see consumers making decisions in the market. And so you might be tempted into thinking that self-interest must mean it's answer choice C, you're excluding others in your thinking. But what it actually means when we say consumers are selfish or self-interested is that consumers make decisions which optimize or maximize their own profit or utility or total benefit, right? And so in terms of the market, what we're actually going to see is the right answer is answer choice A, which is seeking the lowest price for a product. Because by seeking the lowest price for a product, the consumer maximizes their consumer surplus, in which there's trying to find the largest difference between how much is their maximum willingness to pay and how much do they actually pay. By seeking the lowest price, they're maximizing that difference, and that's going to basically allow them to have the optimal amount of benefit for themselves. And that's a classic example of expression of self-interest in economics. And so the correct answer for this question is going to be that consumers express self-interest when they A. seek the lowest price for a product. Let's take a look at the previous answer choice. And the previous tutor also said A, seek the lowest price for a product. Okay, let's go on to question number 31. So question 31 says, refer to the above. Okay, so there's no graph here, so we can't do that one. 32 says table, and we don't have the table, so we're going to go to 33. If farmers withhold some of their current corn harvest from the market because they anticipate a higher price of corn in the near future, then this would cause a movement up along the supply curve of corn, B, movement down along the current supply curve of corn, C, leftward shift in the current supply of corn, or D, rightward shift in this current supply of corn. So looking at this answer choice, we know there's two distinctions being drawn. First is what is a shift, this is the demand curve. What is a shift of the supply curve, and what is a movement along the supply curve? So remember, we have our price on the y-axis, we have our quantity on the x-axis, and so answer choices A and B imply that we're moving somewhere along this curve. The supply curve stays stagnant, right? And we're moving from point to point. So we want to move from this point to this point, or from that point to that point, right? And that's a movement up or down the curve. And so the only reason we would see a movement up or down the curve is if the thing that is changing is the current price of the good. If the current price of the good suddenly falls, we know the quantity supplied is going to decrease, and if the current price of the good increases, then we know that the quantity supplied of that good is also going to increase. That's the only thing that causes there to be movement along the curve. Anything else that's changing is going to cause there to be a shift in the overall supply, which is basically a shift in the quantity supplied at every price level. And so what we're dealing with here, farmers are withholding current corn harvest from the market because they anticipate a higher price of corn in the near future. That is going to be a determinant of supply, which is in expectations of future prices. And so changes in expectations of future prices are going to be one of those things that causes us to have a shift of the curve either to the left or to the right. So the question is, which direction is a shift in? And so the question says that farmers are withholding their current harvest, which means they're not selling as much as they used to, which means at every single price level, the overall quantity supply is going to decrease. And that's going to be characterized by a leftward shift in the supply curve, or a shift from this price level, this quantity supplied to this quantity supplied, where the price level stays the same, but the quantity supplied has gone down, right? And so that's going to be our leftward shift in the current supply of corn. The correct answer choice here would be C. If farmers withhold some of their current corn harvest from the market because they anticipate a higher price of corn in the near future, then this would cause a leftward shift in the current supply of corn. Let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer, and they said 33, a leftward shift in the current supply of corn as well. So that's great. We're all on the right page. All right, let's move on to answer choice question number 34. So question 34 says, which of the following will not cause the supply curve to shift? A says, a technological change in the production of the good. B says, a change in the price of other goods that producers could be producing. C says, a change in the costs of resources needed to produce the good. And D says, a change in the price of the good. And so, we're talking about a shift in a shift in the supply curve, which means we're looking for which one of these is not a determinant of supply. So A says technological change in the production of the good. And we know that change in technology is going to be a determinant of supply, in that if you are able to leverage technology to be more efficient in your production, then you're going to be able to produce more of a good at every price level. So that's going to be a definitely yes, that is a determinant of supply, so it's not going to be one of the answer choices that we're looking at. B says a change in the prices of other goods that producers could be producing. And this is also a determinant of supply. Just like we think of substitutes in the demand side, for the supply side, a supplier might say, I can either produce one of two things. I could produce cars or motorcycles. And so maybe if you can make more money by selling cars instead of motorcycles, you would decrease your production of motorcycles and increase your production of cars. And so alternative products that producers could be making is going to be something that factors into wherever supply curve is. And so that's not going to be the right answer for this question. C says a change in the costs of resources needed to produce the goods. And this is also a supply determinant. We know that input costs are one of the major determinants of how much a producer can afford to supply. And so that's not going to be one of the right answers for this question. And finally, D, a change in the price of the good. And so just like we talked about in the last question, right? If we're talking about a change in the price, we're not talking about a shift between curves. We're talking about a movement from one point on the curve to another point on the curve. And that's what is characterized by the supply curve overall, the relationship between price and quantity supplied. And so if a change in the price occurs, we don't see that causing a supply curve shift. And that's why D is going to be the right answer here. Which one of the following will not cause the supply curve to shift? A change in the price of the good. So with that being said, let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer. So previous tutor said 34, a change in the price of the good. So great, we're in agreement there. Okay, so now let's take a look at the next question, which is question 35. All of the following would affect the position of the supply curve for cranberries except the A, price of agricultural land for cranberries, B, cost of fertilizers for cranberry production, C, popularity of cranberry drinks, and D, development of a new pest control for cranberries. And so again, we're looking for which one of all following is not a supply determinant. So A says the price of agricultural land for cranberries. And we would expect this to affect the supply curve, right? It is a supply determinant. You can think of land as an input into the production of cranberries. And so changes in input prices are obviously going to affect how much a supplier can supply. So A is not going to be the right answer here. B says the costs of fertilizers for cranberry production. And again, fertilizing is an input into cranberry production. We would expect the cost of inputs to again affect the position of supply curve in terms of how much can be supplied at every price level. C says popularity of cranberry drinks. And so this is tricky, right? You would think that if cranberry drinks were more popular, then suppliers would supply more. And you would be correct, right? But you have to remember that the reason that suppliers supply more if cranberry drinks are more popular is not because the supply curve shifts, right? It's not because the quantity of production has increased at every single price level. It's because the demand curve has increased, right? For example, let's again draw our supply and demand curve. We have our demand curve, we have our supply curve. If the popularity of cranberry drinks goes up, we don't see anything impacting supply, right? There's no direct impact of a new hype for cranberry drinks on how much suppliers are going to be producing. The input costs stay the same, the technology stays the same. What we are seeing is an increase in the demand for this good because now more people want it because it's cool. And so that new equilibrium point causes the quantity supplied, right, to shift to increase. So that's why suppliers are shifting, suppliers are producing more cranberry drinks. They're producing a larger quantity of drinks because the price offered is higher due to changes in demand. But the question asks us, which of these affects the position of the supply curve? And the popularity of cranberry drinks simply does not affect our supply curve at all. And so that's going to be probably the best answer for this question. We can just confirm by taking a look at answer choice number D, or letter D. Development of a new pest control for cranberries, and again, the ability of the producer to spray an effective type of pest control onto its cranberries is going to be an input. It is going to be a supply determinant, and so that would also affect the position of the supply curve. So it's really going to be answer choice C. All the following would affect the position of the supply curve for cranberries except the popularity of cranberry drinks. That's going to be the best answer here. And we can take a look at the previous tutor's answer as well. Question 35, popularity of cranberry drinks, which is great. We're agreed as well. So the next question says, question number 36 says, when high school and college graduates apply for jobs in the labor markets, A, job applicants and employers are both buyers. B, job applicants are the sellers while employers are the buyers. C, job applicants and employers are both sellers. D, job applicants are the buyers while employers are the sellers. And so this is really just going to be crux of the labor market. What do we see being representing supply and demand in the labor market? So the labor market is just like any other supply and demand market. You have your suppliers and demanders, or your suppliers and consumers. And so, there's no market in which you only have two sellers and no demanders. You only have two buyers and no sellers, right? So we know A and C are not going to be correct. We have our price, which is our wages, on the y-axis, and you have the quantity of hours being offered as your x-axis. And so, if you think about it off its face value, or if you take this labor market off its face value, a lot of people are tempted to think that job applicants are the buyers and employers are the sellers. Applicants are the ones who want the job; they're the ones who are looking to get the job, and so they're the ones who are looking for opportunities to be employed. And employers are the sellers. Employers have plenty of jobs available. People are applying to them for those jobs. Employees get to decide who they sell to, right? That's the kind of conventional wisdom that you might use to reach the conclusion that D would be the correct answer. And that's not going to be the right chain of logic. What we actually see is we have to talk about what is the unit on the x-axis. And the unit on the x-axis is quantity of hours worked, right? And so in that sense, job applicants are the sellers. Job applicants are saying, for this much money, I'm willing to work this many hours. For a higher amount of money, I'm willing to work more hours. For less money, I'm more willing to work less hours. And that is going to place them as the supplier in this relationship between price and quantity, right? Meanwhile, employers are the buyers. Employers are saying, well, for this many, if you were to supply me this many hours of work, I would be willing to pay you this much money. Or on the other hand, you could say, if you want me to pay you this much money, here's how many hours I would ask you to work, or here's how many people I would need to be able to hire at this price level to work that many hours. And that places them as the buyers in this market. They're buying labor hours, right? So the correct answer here is actually B. When high school and college graduates apply for jobs in the labor markets, job applicants are the sellers while employers are the buyers. And that's going to be a relationship that you can either memorize or that you can also just reach by intuitively looking at the labor market graph. And so let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer for question 36. And they said, job applicants are sellers while employers are buyers. So we're in agreement there as well. Let's go to question 37, which refers to a figure that we don't have, so we can go to question 38. Which of the following statements is correct? If demand increases, then price will decrease. If demand decreases, then price will decrease. If price decreases, then demand will decrease. If price increases, then demand will decrease. So here we're really talking about the law of demand. I think it would be more accurate to use the phrase if quantity demanded increases, not just if demand increases, because sometimes it can be confusing whether or not we're talking about a shift in the curve versus a movement along the curve. But let's assume that we're talking about the law of demand, we're talking about quantity demanded. In that sense, the law of demand tells us that if prices, there's an inverse relationship between prices and quantity demanded. If prices go up, the quantity demanded goes down. If prices go down, the quantity demanded goes up. And so this matches, first of all, we know that price is going to be the leading factor. It's changes in prices that cause changes in quantity demanded, not the other way around. And so it's not going to be A or B. And finally, which one of these gets the relationship right? And we said it was an inverse relationship, and that must mean it's going to be answer choice D, right? If prices go up, the demand will decrease. If things are more expensive, then the quantity demanded by buyers will go down. And so that's going to be our correct answer here. Which of the following statements is correct? D. If price increases, then demand will decrease. Assuming we're talking about quantity demanded. So 38 says if price increases, the demand will decrease as well. So that is the correct answer here. Okay, let's go to question 39. Which would be a likely cause of an increase in demand for pizza? A. A decrease in the price of hamburger sandwiches. B. A health report showing eating pizza reduces stress. C. A reduced desire for takeout and fast food dining. D. A decrease in the price of cheeses, pepperoni, and mushrooms. And so we're looking for determinants of demand, right? Which one of these is going to cause the quantity demanded of pizza to increase at every single price level? And so let's take a look at each of these answer choices. We're looking for demand determinants. A says a decrease in the price of hamburger sandwiches. So let's assume, I think the intuitive assumption here is that hamburger sandwiches and pizzas are substitutes. You want something for dinner, you want fast food, you can either buy pizza or hamburger sandwiches. So if hamburger sandwiches are substitutes and the price for hamburger sandwiches goes down, that means the demand for hamburger sandwiches goes up. And if it's a substitute, that means the associated demand for pizza is going to go down as people who formerly buy pizza are attracted to buy hamburger sandwiches at a lower price instead. So that's not going to be the right answer because although it is demand determinant, it is not getting the direction of change correct. We're looking for an increase in demand and this will cause a decrease in demand. Okay, number 2. A health report showing eating pizza reduces stress. And so this could increase the expected benefits associated with eating pizza. And it is possible that that would cause an increase in demand for pizza. That people say, oh, I want to be less stressed. And so I see this health report, I'm going to buy more pizza than I used to. And so that could increase the demand for pizza. So let's tentatively say yes to that one, but we can take a look at the other questions as well. C says a reduced desire for takeout and fast food dining. If you don't want to have takeout and fast food dining, assuming that pizza is falling under the category of takeout and fast food dining, then that reduction in desire is going to decrease the demand for pizza, not increase it. And finally, D says a decrease in the prices of cheese, pepperoni, and mushrooms. So assuming these are inputs to the production of pizza, we would expect this to increase the quantity of pizza supplied, or increase the supply of pizza overall, but it would not really have an effect on the demand for pizza, right? It's still that's going to be supply side determinant, not a demand determinant. So it looks like B is going to be our best answer choice here. Which would be a likely cause for an increase in demand for pizza? B. A health report showing eating pizza reduces stress. Let's take a look at the previous answer choice. 39 also says a health report showing eating pizza reduces stress. Great. Let's move on to question number 40. A market for a product reaches equilibrium when A. Prices fall further after there is a shortage. B. Prices rise further after there is a surplus. C. Buyers intend to buy a quantity equal to the quantity that sellers intend to sell. D. The actual quantity bought by buyers equals the actual quantity sold by sellers. And so let's take a look at our supply and demand curve. Whoops. Okay, come on. So we have our y-axis, x-axis, price, quantity, demand, supply. This is our equilibrium point, right? What is it equal to? It's a point in which buyers. So it's a point in which the buyers apply the same amount that Yeah, buyers and sellers sell and consume the same amount of goods and services with no surplus or shortage, right? Suppliers say at this price level, I want to supply quantity Q, and demanders at the exact same price level also say they want to demand exactly the same amount of quantity Q. And so, in that sense, that's going to be the match. And so we know that A and B are not going to be the right answer, right? There's no shortage, there's no surplus. Equilibrium is characterized by a match between quantities demanded and quantities supplied. So the question here is, and the reason for my hesitation was, what is the difference between answer choices C and D? Answer choice C says the amount that buyers intend to buy and sellers intend to sell, and D says the actual amount that quantities sell, the actual quantity that buyers buy, and the actual quantity that sellers sell. And so the distinction between these two is that supply and demand, that the market for a product reaching equilibrium is a snapshot point in time. It does not represent a cumulative amount being bought or sold. And so when a market reaches equilibrium, it is saying that this is the intended quantity bought and sold tracked by the supply and demand curve. It is not a measurement of what is actually happening in real life, which is the actual quantity buyers and sellers sell, right? And it also doesn't track what has historically happened in the past in getting to the equilibrium. And so intention to sell and intention to buy is probably a better gauge for what equilibrium means compared to the actual quantity sold or bought. That being said, I think the distinction is fairly marginal and fairly small, and so I would not expect to see many questions which would ask you to distinguish between these two aspects of equilibrium in a market. So let's take a look at the previous tutor and see if they agreed with what I said. The previous tutor said 40 buyers intend to buy a quantity equal to the quantity that sellers intend to sell. Right, so that is going to be the right answer, and we can move on to the next question. Number 41. A higher price reduces the quantity demanded for a product because A, individuals can afford less of the product and will switch to substitutes. B, the financial assets of individuals increase. C, individuals will buy more of the product and less of its substitutes. Or D, the purchasing power of individuals increases. So this question is basically saying what are the reasons why the law of demand holds true? What is the rationale why higher prices reduce quantity demanded? And so let's break it down by the different answer choices we're allowed to choose between. A says individuals can afford less of the product and will switch to substitutes. And so this is going to be one of those things, right? If we hold income constant, individuals have the same amount of money to work with. By increasing the prices, you inherently make it so that individuals cannot buy as many units of this good as they could before. Let's say you have $10 and the price of apples is $1. You could buy 10 apples. If the price increases to $2, you simply holding your income constant can only afford to buy 5 apples now instead of 10 apples before. And so when individuals can afford less of the product, they're going to switch to different goods, and so that is going to reduce the quantity demanded for a product. So that is, I think, a good answer choice that we could look at. But let's make sure that we're not being fooled by that, and there aren't better ones available. B says the financial assets of individuals increase. And so there's no association between increasing prices and the increasing the financial assets of individuals, and so that's not going to be a good answer for this question. C says individuals will buy more of the product and less of its substitutes. So again, we know that individuals, if the price is high, are not going to buy more of the product; they're going to buy less of the product, and so that's going to answer choice C reverses that relationship, and so it's not going to be a good answer choice here. And answer choice D says the purchasing power of individuals increases, and so by increasing prices, you actually don't increase the purchasing power of individuals. You're decreasing the purchasing power of individuals because they are no longer able to buy as many of the goods as they used to before. So it looks like answer choice A is going to be the best answer here. A higher price reduces the quantity demanded for a product because individuals can afford less of the product and will switch to substitutes. And we can take a look at the next answer choice. No, sorry, the previous tutor's answer. And they also said individuals can afford less of the product and will switch to substitutes. Great. So let's move on to question 42. The idea of the law of demand as applied to electric cars assumes which of the following to be constant. So we know two things won't be constant, right? The law of demand does not hold prices constant, and it does not hold quantity demanded constant. So anything else, theoretically, should be held constant. So which of the following is assumed to be constant? A, the price of electric cars. So like I just said, with the law of demand, we know that price and quantity demanded are free to vary based on where you are on the demand curve, right? And so we're not going to hold those two things constant. And so price of electric cars is definitely not going to be held constant. B says how much sellers are charging customers for electric cars. And so we assume that we assume that sellers, the price that sellers charge is independent of what the law of demand is saying. And normally when we're talking about equilibrium, how much sellers are charging customers for electric cars is going to be the intersection between supply and demand curves. And so that is something that is always changing. And so we would also assume that the price that sellers are charging is going to be variable as well. C is the price of gasoline cars. And so we would assume that gasoline cars and electric cars are substitutes, right? And so this is going to be something that affects where the entire demand curve is on the graph, right? It could shift this demand curve to the right, it could shift the demand curve to the left. And in order for us to work with the law of demand, we have to assume that the price of substitute goods like gasoline cars is constant, so that there's no kind of third factor that is confounding our ability to tie quantity supplied to the price of quantity demanded to the price being charged. And so we're going to assume that yes, price of gasoline cars is assumed to be constant, and so that's going to be a favorite for right answer choice here. But let's take a look at answer choice D just to make sure. Answer choice D says quantity of electric cars demanded by buyers. And again, we know for the law of demand, we assume that price and quantity demanded are both free floating, and so that's not going to be the case where we have to assume that quantity of electric cars demanded by buyers is constant. That can also be fluctuating as well. And so the correct answer here is C. The idea of the law of demand as applied to electric cars assumes which one of the following to be constant. C, price of gasoline cars. And so we can take a look at the answer choice here. Number 42, price of gasoline cars. Great. So let's take a look at question number 43, which I believe is a graph, right? And so we don't have the graph, we can't do that. Let's just move on to question 44. Which of the following factors will decrease the current demand for a product? A decrease in the current price of a complementary product. B, a decrease in the current price of a substitute product. C, an increase in the current price of a substitute product. Or D, an expected increase in the future price of the product. So what is a decrease in the current demand for a product is going to be basically we're talking about excuse me. Excuse me. So again, we're talking about which one of these is going to be a demand determinant that decreases the demand today. And so we can go down the answer choices to break this down. A says a decrease in the current price of a complementary product. So complementary products are products that are bought in at the same time or together with our product, our current product at hand, right? And so if the price of a complementary product decreases, that's going to increase the demand for the complementary product, and as a result, will also increase the current demand for our product as well. And so that's not going to be the right answer choice because it is a demand determinant, but it gets the direction of change wrong. B says a decrease in the current price of a substitute product. So substitute products are products that are interchangeable with our product. If the price of a substitute product decreases, we know that the demand for that substitute product is going to increase, and people are going to buy less of our product in favor of the substitute product. And so that is going to be something that decreases current demand. So we are going to treat that as a favorite for our answer for this question. C says an increase in the current price of a substitute product. So just like we established before, the relationship between substitute products is the same as before, but increasing the price of a substitute product is going to decrease the demand for the substitute product and increase the demand for our product as people move away from our substitute product and towards our current product. And so if this is going to get the direction of change wrong, we want to decrease the demand, not increase it. And so this is going to be the wrong answer for this question. And finally, D says an expected increase in the future price of the product, and that's going to increase the demand for the product today because we assume that demand, if buyers know that the product will be more expensive in the future, then they're going to try to stock up on this product today when it's still cheap, and that's going to increase the current demand rather than decrease it. So it's not going to be the right answer. So our best answer here is answer choice B. Which one of the following factors will decrease the current demand for a product? B, a decrease in the current price of a substitute product. So let's check our previous tutor's answer. So previous tutor also says a decrease in the current price of a substitute product as well. So that's going to be the right answer here. 45. In competitive markets, a surplus or shortage will A, cause shifts in the demand-supply curve that tend to eliminate the surplus or shortage. B, cause changes in the quantities demanded and supply that tends to intensify the surplus or shortage. C, cause changes in the quantities demanded and supply that tends to eliminate the surplus or shortage. Or D, never exists because the markets are always at equilibrium. So let's draw out what a surplus or shortage looks like. We have our price, we have our quantity. So a supply and demand. So we can have a surplus if a price is too high, right? And we can also have a shortage. The price is too low. And so the question is, in competitive markets, what happens when we have a surplus or shortage? We know the answer to that is that assuming there is no government regulation, that's a fully competitive market, the market is always going to find a way to get back to the equilibrium point, right? There's no reason why a surplus or shortage should stick around if the elements of the market are free moving or variable, right? And so what happens is that if you have a shortage, your price is too low. And so what's going to happen is your quantity, demand, and supply are going to continue to change, and prices are going to go up until you reach the equilibrium price. Whereas if you have a surplus, you'll see that the quantity, demand, and supply are going to shift, and they're going to move the price lower until you reach the equilibrium point as well, until a surplus is eliminated or a shortage is eliminated. And so we're going to look for an answer choice that talks about how the surplus or shortage is going to be eliminated by movement towards the equilibrium. So answer choice A says, a surplus or shortage will cause shifts in the demand-supply curve that tend to eliminate the surplus or shortage. And so we know that, first of all, surpluses and shortages do not cause shifts in the supply curve. None of these curves, neither supply or demand is actually moving, right? It's just changes in quantities, demand, and supply. So that's going to be incorrect. Number 2 says, causes changes in the quantities, demand, and supply that tend to intensify the surplus or shortage. So while this answer choice does talk about changes in quantity, demand, and supply, it says that surpluses and shortages will be intensified, and that's not going to be correct, right? We know that in competitive markets, surpluses and shortages are actually eliminated by changes in quantity, demand, and supply. So B is not going to be correct as well. C says changes in the quantities, demand, and supply that tend to eliminate supply or shortage, and this seems to be the best answer, right? We know that the quantities, demand, and supply are changing, and we know that supplies and shortages are going to be eliminated. And D says never exists because the market is always at equilibrium, and so there may be points in time where a surplus or shortage will occur. For example, you deregulate a market, but you still have the leftover surplus or shortage, and the competitive market then moves it towards the equilibrium point. So there are situations in which a market is not going to be in equilibrium, but we know that it will always end up in equilibrium. And so C is going to be the best answer. In competitive markets, a surplus or shortage will cause changes in the quantity demanded and supply, but tend to eliminate the surplus or shortage. Okay, let's take a look at what the previous tutor said. So previous tutor said, 45, cause changes in the quantities, demand, and supplies that tend to intensify surplus or shortage. So I think the previous tutor mixed up the two answer choices. Again, I'll reiterate, changes in quantities, demand, and supply are what happens when you have surplus and shortage, but they do not intensify the surplus or shortage. They eliminate the surplus or shortage. So let's leave this as the correct answer as well. The correct answer is there we go. Okay, let's move on to question 46. 46 says, which of the following will cause a leftward shift in supply curve for car washes? A decrease in taxes on car washes. B, an increase in the price of car washing equipment. C, a decrease in the price of water. Or D, an increase in the number of cars in the city. So we're talking about a leftward shift in the supply curve. We know we're talking about a supply determinant. And so a leftward shift in the supply curve is going to be a supply determinant that is changing in a way that reduces the quantity supplied at every price level. So A says a decrease in taxes on car washes. If taxes were to decrease, then the supply curve is going to go to the right, Because we're saying that it's now less expensive to produce goods, and therefore we can produce more goods at every price level. So A is not going to be correct. B says the increase in the price of car washing equipment. So if we assume that car washing equipment is an input for car washes, then yes, an increase in the price of car washing equipment would reduce the quantity supplied of car washes at every price level. And so this is going to be a supply determinant that does cause a leftward shift. So we're going to keep an eye on that one for sure. C says a decrease in the price of water. So we assume that water is a supply input. Then if the price of an input goes down, the quantity supplied at every price level goes up. And so that's going to be a rightward shift in the supply curve. So it is a supply determinant, but it gets the direction wrong. And finally, D, an increase in the number of cars in the city. And so this is going to be a change in the demand for car washes, not the supply. And so we're not going to be choosing that answer as the correct answer. So the correct answer for number 46 should be B. Which one of the following would cause a leftward shift in the supply curve for car washes? B, an increase in the price of car washing equipment. Great. Let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer. And the previous tutor says B, an increase in the price of car washing equipment. Great. Taking a look at 47. The market system automatically corrects a surplus condition in a competitive market by A, raising the price of the commodity in question while decreasing the quantity demanded. B, raising the price of the commodity in question while increasing the quantity demanded. C, reducing the price of the commodity in question while increasing the quantity demanded. Or D, reducing the price of the commodity in question while decreasing the quantity demanded. And so we know that we're correcting this surplus condition. Surplus is when you have an excess of quantity supplied, not enough quantity demanded, and the price too high. So the first thing we know is that the price is going to be reduced. And so A and B are going to be eliminated because those both talk about raising prices. And so we're left between C and D. And the question is, are we increasing quantity demanded or decreasing quantity demanded? So we can see here, if we're trying to eliminate the surplus, during the surplus, we have a quantity demanded of Q1. And after the surplus at equilibrium, we would have a quantity demanded of Q star. And so this is an increase in quantity demanded. And therefore, the correct answer is going to be C. We're going to be reducing the price, The price has gone down. I'll draw that out as well. This is P star, the equilibrium quantity. This is P1, the previous quantity, and this is going down. So we're reducing the price of the commodity in question, P1 to P star, while increasing the quantity demanded, Q1 to Q star. And so that's going to be the correct answer for this question. The market system automatically corrects a surplus condition in a competitive market by reducing the price of the commodity in question while increasing the quantity demanded. Okay, let's take a look at the previous answer given by the tutor. Number 47, reduces the price of the commodity in question while increasing the quantity demanded. So great, we're all in agreement there. Let's take a look at question 48. A leftward shift in the supply curve for oil in the United States is most likely to result from which of the following? A decrease in the whole world price of oil. B, an increase in the cost of exploration and drilling for oil. C, an increase in the subsidy for oil exploration and drilling. Or D, a decrease in the fees that oil companies must pay for drilling licenses. So again, we're looking for a supply determinant, and we're looking for one that decreases the quantity supplied at every price level. So A talks about a decrease in the world price for oil, and this does not have an impact on the quantity supplied by the quantity supplied at every price level for United States oil. This is a question that would, or an answer choice that would relate more to imports versus exports, but it doesn't really affect the position of the supply curve domestically. B says an increase in the cost of exploration and drilling for oil. And so if we assume that the cost of exploration and drilling for oil is an input into supplying oil in the United States, which is likely, then an increase in input costs causes a leftward shift of supply, and that quantity supplied goes down for every price level. And so this is going to be a promising answer for our question. C says the increase in the subsidy for oil exploration and drilling. If you're increasing a subsidy for oil exploration and drilling, what you're doing is you're reducing the cost of production, and that's actually going to cause a rightward shift in the supply curve for oil in the United States, not a leftward shift. So C is not going to be the right answer. And D says a decrease in the fees that oil companies must pay for drilling licenses. And again, that makes it cheaper to drill for oil, which means you would cause a rightward shift of the supply curve, where quantity supply goes up at all price levels rather than down. And so it looks like B is going to be the best answer for us. A leftward shift in the supply curve for oil in the United States is most likely to result from an increase in the cost of exploration and drilling for oil. Let's take a look at the previous tutor's answer. Question 48, an increase in the cost of exploration and drilling for oil. So we're in agreement there. And question 49, a fall in the price of milk used in the production of ice cream will A, decrease the supply of ice cream, B, have no effect on the supply of ice cream, C, increase the supply of ice cream, or D, cause a movement along the supply curve of ice cream. So if the price of milk falls and milk is used in the production of ice cream, that means milk is an input for production of ice cream. If an input price falls, that means we can afford to buy more of it, and that means overall we would expect production of the primary good, which is ice cream, to increase. And so that's going to be the answer choice that we're looking for. A says a decrease in supply of ice cream, and so we're looking for an increase in supply of ice cream, so that's not going to be the right answer. B says have no effect on the supply of ice cream, and again, we expect there to be an increase, so that's not going to be the right answer. C says increase the supply of ice cream, which is what we're looking for, and D says cause a movement along the supply curve of ice cream. And again, we know that a movement along the supply curve of ice cream can only be caused by a change in the price of ice cream, and over here we only have a change in the price of milk. And so what we're going to see is that answer choice C is the best answer for us. A fall in the price of milk used in the production of ice cream will increase the supply of ice cream. And so that's going to be the best answer for us here. And giving a look at the previous tutor's answers, they also say an increase in the supply of ice cream. And so that's going to be the best answer. And finally, question 50 refers to a graph that we don't have, so we can't answer that here. And that should be, I think, all we have for today. I'm going to mark this question as incorrect just because there was this one question that the previous tutor had misclicked on. And so that's going to be the right answer here. It looks like we sped through today's questions fairly quickly. And so again, hopefully that was all helpful and that answers any questions that some of you might have had about these supply and demand relationships. And again, hope everybody's staying healthy and safe. And I'll see you guys again on Thursday for some more economic questions.